Gather round, ye children, and I shall tell you of a tale of a forgotten game by Sega for the Super Nintendo. What game is that? Why, it is Legend. Legend of what? It is simply called Legend, the greatest title of any game ever conceived. And now we shall go to the intro sequence with Conan the Barbarian ripoff music. Legend. Baldur the Maleficent reigned as a despot over the kingdom of Select for 1,000 years. All was chaos and destruction. Many knights went on a final crusade to destroy Baldur, but none returned. The people united, built energized heroes, and imprisoned Baldur's soul. Now, Clovis, corrupt son of the king of Select, wants to harness Baldur's power and conquer the kingdom. For he is a stereotypical villain in this generic plot, which is truly greatness. And though we go into the intro sequence, we're greeted with a title and a constipated Chuck Norris and some other guy in the background. We shall go to options first. We shall remain on easy because we are pussies. We shall change our color to blue, and Share Lives doesn't do anything because we were only playing with one player. And now we shall start the legend. Stage 1, the beginning of the quest. Cross the forest and find the generic old wizard. For he must be important, or something. And thus, we go into the game. You press Y to swing your mighty sword at the many generic goons. You press L and R to block from the generic goons' attacks. You can press B to jump high into the air. And you can attack in the air as well, and even do a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time kick. Fly across the air. Your character moves quite slow, but can fly very far with the Turtles in Time kick, which makes things a little off balance, but still, it is greatness! Pressing A will allow you to throw a special attack, which is a chilly breath of some kind, and pressing X will initiate a special attack. Now, as you notice here, the AI is quite sophisticated, and they will proceed to kick your ass if you're not careful, which is why you must time your attacks precisely, and thus you throw the chilly breath right there, as I mentioned earlier, and you pick up chicken and bread for health, steal their loots for points, magic bags for attacks, and keys for something, and thus you can get trapped on both sides, but by blocking and attacking at the right opportunities, she'll assure you for victory. And I stuttered, ha ha ha. And thus you fight many hordes of generic goons, for it is the greatness of this arcade style game, which is to believe to be an arcade port. At least that's what I believe. And thus you have the time limit, bar, and special attacks and magic, and points of course, which is your gold. Gold, I believe, will be used for something later, but we shall find out if we do make it later. And thus, as we can see here, part of the foreground can get in the way sometimes and become a nuisance, but it only happens occasionally, and thus we see ninja archers, but we shall do our Turtles in Time kick, after failing of course, because you cannot block arrows, and we shall kick them, and steal the bread, and attack. And thus, we reached the tree bridge, and we reached the sub-boss, the troll. Epic music plays as our hero flies across with his Ninja Turtle kick, but flies over him, not hitting him. And thus, the troll is one mean mother, as he can keep attacking, and blocking will not seem to work very well against the troll. As our hero valiantly fights against the troll, it is truly one of the greatest battles ever conceived for a 2D game. And the troll attacks him from behind, for the character moves too slow. But thus, our hero counters with his chilly breath, and attacks with his jump attacks, which are the fastest attacks in this game. And thus, I shall discuss the graphics, which are quite good for a Super Nintendo game, and the music and sound effects are quite good at times. Even if sound clips repeat and music repeats, it is still quite of good quality. And thus, our hero dies. And our troll keeps attacking. And we shall see the Mode 7 sword of continuation, and we shall continue with our legend. And thus we have to start the stage all over again, unfortunately. And it is here you press X to use your magic attacks once you have 2 magics. Our player didn't realize that until now. And thus, our rematch with the troll begins! Our hero tries to use the Turtles in Time kick, but fails. Thus, he now tries to use his jump attacks, but the troll is quite sophisticated in his AI, and will attack you cheaply. And thus he kills our hero, but he still has lives. And it is here that our hero finally figured out how to defeat the troll. You just keep jump attacking him at the right timing, but unfortunately the troll can still get in there and attack. A Turtles in Time kick finally hits as our hero tries to destroy him. And thus he does. And thus we get to the crows, which we still pick up swamp turkeys. And we come across Mudmen. Mudmen most foul. And thus we are now, since we are in a swamp, our character now moves even slower than ever, which becomes quite a nuisance. And thus you just keep jump attacking these Mudmen, for they are great. Some would say that the combat in this game is quite slow, but I call it intuitive, as your sword has weight and reacts accordingly, and you must block and attack and block and attack. And it makes things quite epic and dynamic for a Super Nintendo game, even if the jump attacks are faster and make things a little off balance. And thus, our hero is trapped between 2 Mudmen, but using the blocking and attacking technique, we shall prevail. And thus, our hero reaches the boss, the tree groper, and dies. And thus, the legend is over. For now, we shall go on to the overview! The pros of this game is that the game has very good music and sound and graphic quality for a Super Nintendo game. The combat is very intuitive and fun. The cons of this game is that your character moves quite slow and is off balance with his jump attacks. And you'll encounter several enemies over and over again in certain areas, but overall it is still a solid Super Nintendo game that you should pick it up if you find it. And thus the review is over!